So what does a simple glass of cow's milk actually do to your blood sugar? You hear all kinds of things, right? Well, today we're going to cut through all that noise by looking at a really cool personal experiment that gives us a super clear answer.
So let's just dive right in. The main question we're tackling is pretty straightforward. What happens to your blood glucose when you drink 300 milliliters of regular old cow's milk? Now, the method here is awesome because it's so simple. This isn't some complicated study in a lab. Nope, this is a real-world test somebody did on themselves using a glucose monitor to see in real time what a common brand of milk does.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of the test. The person drank 300 milliliters of Amul cow's milk. It's a really popular brand in India, and that glass has about 200 calories. Setting this clear baseline is absolutely key to making sense of the results.
So what happened? The result was a surprisingly small blood sugar increase of just 7 milligrams. Now, at first glance, you might be thinking, hey, that's great. But hold on, because that one number, it doesn't even begin to tell the whole story. And this is where it gets really, really interesting.
To really understand what that 7 milligram spike actually means, we've got to put it in context. And when we do that, well, it reveals something totally unexpected.
You see, the person who ran this experiment actually had a theory going in. They'd already tested something called toned milk, which is just milk with some of the fat removed, and they thought this regular cow's milk would cause an even smaller spike. Why? Well, the logic is simple. More fat should slow down the sugar release, right? So this sets up a direct showdown. 4% fat cow's milk versus 3% fat toned milk. Conventional wisdom tells us that the extra 1% of fat should have cushioned the glucose response, giving us a smaller spike. But that's not what happened at all.
And here it is, the big twist. The result was identical. I mean, you can see it right there. Both bars are sitting at exactly 7 milligrams. That extra 1% of fat in the cow's milk made absolutely zero difference to the blood sugar response.
And that, right there, is the big puzzle. We know that fat is supposed to slow down how fast your stomach empties, which in turn should slow down how fast the sugar from the milk gets into your blood. So why didn't that happen here? What gives? To solve this mystery, we need to add just one more piece of data into the mix. This is the piece that's going to reveal the truth about this whole fat factor thing. Okay, check this out. The top two rows just confirm what we already found out. Both 3% and 4% fat milk give you that 7 milligram spike. But now look at that third row. When we jump all the way up to full cream milk with 6% fat, whoa, the blood sugar spike just plummets down to only 2 milligrams. And there it is. That's the key insight. That little 1% difference in fat between toned and regular cow's milk, it just wasn't enough to move the needle. It seems like there's a threshold you have to cross. To get that big blood sugar blunting effect, the fat content had to make a much bigger leap, nearly doubling to 6%.
All right, so now that we've cracked that case, there's one more little bonus insight from this experiment that's super useful, and it's all about the buzz around A2 milk. So for anyone who's not familiar, the difference between A1 and A2 milk is basically a tiny little variation in one of the proteins inside. The whole theory is that the A2 version is easier for some people to digest, which is why you see it marketed as this premium, gut-friendly choice.
And here's a really great tip for you, especially if you're in India. Before you go and spend extra money on milk that's specifically labeled A2, get this. The source for this explainer points out that the vast majority of cow's milk from native Indian breeds is already the A2 type, just by default. Pretty cool, right? So let's just boil this all down. What are the key takeaways? First, a standard glass of cow's milk with 4% fat will raise your blood sugar by about 7 mg, a really small amount. Second, a tiny 1% increase in fat doesn't really do anything. It's basically negligible. And third, if you really want to use fat to lower that spike, you've got to go big, like the 6% you'd find in full cream milk.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If a small 1% difference in fat made no impact here, what other minor nutritional tweaks that we kind of obsess over might also be less important than we think? It's definitely something to think about the next time you're comparing two nutrition labels.